States Army and a grateful nation, please accept this flag as a symbol of our appreciation. It was undoubtedly.
Friends, before we begin the service, the religious part of the service, we shall perform a very ancient ritual which is called Kriya in the Hebrew language. This ritual dates back to the biblical period of our history. In the text of the Tanakh of the Hebrew Bible, we often find that whenever people receive sad news, including those of a passing of a loved one, they would tear their clothes and put the dust upon the head as a sign of mourning. And the custom of rending our garment when the close relative departs from this world, we retained in our community to this day. Therefore, at this time, I shall tear the ribbons given to the immediate family of Jairus. Okay? Remain seated. Tonight, with the sundown, the second day commences, and that's how you calculate from sundown to sundown. The last day, the seventh day, is also a short one. It ends basically after breakfast, well, after shacharit, but if you don't, after breakfast, and then you start. It's just a guideline, right? So no penalties will be incurred if you, except for you people.
You get to make it all up.
Exactly. A long time ago, like 30 years ago, 30 plus years ago, when I was still a young man, studying at the Rabbinical Academy, I had a teacher who was a fascinating individual. He was a professor of history. His name was Jacob Rader Marcus. He lived a very long life. He lived to be almost 100. He fell short by that remarkable landmark. He showed of that remarkable landmark by a couple of weeks, literally. He was a very prominent scholar. In fact, Dr. Marcus was the one who wrote the very first book on the history of the American Jewry. So he really was an outstanding historian, very respected figure. Now, I was the last class that he taught. He was 98 and a half at the time, but very sharp, very brilliant mind, you know. It was lucky, just like Jerry, you know, till the end, brilliant mind. So we started talking about funerals. And Dr. Marcus told me something that I found to be astounding. Again, I was young. Like many young people, I perceived death rather dramatically. He told me, he was from West Virginia, so he had this, you know, special way of talking, you know. He said, Michael, y'all better believe it. 5 minutes better be enough to say everything important about anybody. To me, it was so crazy. He said, what do you mean? A funeral is a landmark. It's a life-changing event. And you're talking about 5 minutes, right? Now, but when I started practicing as a rabbi, I realized that he knew what he was talking about. Like 5 years after that conversation, I was already up here in Chicago, this happened in Skokie, right by Skokie Swift. So the family, their father passed away, 2 sons, I was sitting in the house, and we were talking about things, you know, and I quoted my professor to one of the sons, and DJ got tired of listening to the rabbi. Look, if I were DJ, you know, if I were in his place, I would have started much earlier. Like after the first 2 sentences, I would have been done. So I want to thank DJ for his attention. So I quoted my professor to one of the sons, and he said, but Rabbi, this is so sad. I said, what's so sad? He said, the whole human life in 5 minutes. And I answered spontaneously. I didn't even think about it, just came out by itself. I said, okay, what good is a book if you cannot tell me in 5 minutes what the book is about? Life is a book. Like any book, it has the beginning. Like any book, it has the ending. That's how it is. And inside that book, we have chapters, we have landmarks, we have events. Some of them are good, some of them are highly unpleasant. Well, again, that's the nature of human existence. But when we gather together to honor people whom we love and respect, it's not only about the pain of loss, which we all feel today, and of course we're here to support Gene, to support Keith, to support Stacy, the whole family, to support one another, yes. But with the passage of time, the pain of loss will subside. It's normal, it should be this way. But what will remain? Well, Jerry's book, that's what will remain. Jerry's book of life. We all, each of us, will write our own. Jerry has written his. And I think you all agree with me. It's a great book. It's a great book. Because, one can only dream about it when most people don't get to live it. And that is a complete, fulfilling, profoundly meaningful life in all respects, whichever aspect of human existence in this world you take. So that's not the reason for sorrow. That is the reason for joy and pride and really a celebration. It sounds cliche, but in Jerry's case, how else can you describe that? Or to put it colloquially, it was a great run. It was a great run. Now, how do we write that book? Well, again, we'll live through events, landmarks. Some are bigger, some are smaller. But they all are important. Because every minute that we're present in this world, we build that legacy. We are writing that book. And King Solomon, 3,000 years ago, discussed exactly that in his very famous passage from the book of Ecclesiastes, chapter 3. You'll know this passage even if you never read the book. For everything there is a season, a time for every experience under the heaven, a time to be born, and a time to die. I think there was even a song about that in the 60s, right? So, Keith, you can't remember that. Right. Okay, Keith, if you do remember the 60s, you were not there. Trust me. Trust me. Yes, I can tell. Right. Because you remember, those who, yeah. The words of King Solomon, chapter 3, where he reflects on the meaning of our lives. לכל זמן ועת לחול חפש תחת השמיים, עת לרדת ועת למות, עת לדעת ועת לקור נטוע, עת לפרוץ ועת לבנות, עת לבכות ועת לשחוק, עת צפות ועת רקוד, עת להשליך אבנים ועת כנוס אבנים, עת לחבוק ועת לרחוק מחבק, עת לבקש ועת לאבד, עת לשמור ועת להשליך, עת לקרוא ועת לתפור, עת לחשות ועת לדבר. For everything there is a season and a time for every experience under the heaven. A time to be born and a time to die. A time to plant and a time to uproot what is planted. A time to break down and a time to build up. A time to weep and a time to laugh. A time to mourn and a time to dance. A time to cast away stones and a time to gather stones together. A time to embrace and a time to refrain from embracing. A time to seek and a time to lose. A time to keep and a time to discard. A time to rend and a time to sow. A time to keep silence and a time to speak. It is a time to speak. It is a time to reflect on Jerry's book of life. And again, this is a wonderful book. Now, Jerry belongs to that generation of our people that we sometimes call children of the Great Depression. He came into this world in 1927. Again, it was a great run. But again, the great run is not about the length of your days. It's about how you live them. And Jerry lived them in a beautiful, very profound fashion. His background, Jerry's background, is a classical Chicago Jewish background. In the city, West Side, Marshall High School. So when it comes to Chicago, it doesn't get any more Jewish than that, in that generation at least, right? And again, as I said, he was a child of depression. What does it mean? It means that he was a kid and his childhood was, well, downright poor. Very humble circumstances, which was, again, the case for most Americans. After all, I'm not going to get into that. I'm an economist. You'll figure it out. But the unemployment rate was 25%. I mean, that was rough. That was a terrible time. The market lost 89% of its value. I'm not going to give you any more figures, but that should tell you how bad it was. It didn't recover until the early 50s, by the way. 12 years down. So this was Jerry's childhood. His father was a fruit and produce peddler, right? So to make ends meet, the kid had to, well, start early. He would help his dad. Because you see, so his dad, Sam, he would go and peddle fruit and produce in the Jewish neighborhood Monday through Friday. But then on Shabbos, he couldn't do that, so he went to the Polish neighborhood. And on Shabbos, well, again, you have to survive, so forget about Shabbos. You gotta feed your family. So Jerry Sam, he went over there. And he was smart from the very, very outset. He was a smart kid. So he actually always in his mind figured out how much his dad made. You know, how much he paid to purchase it, how much he sold, and what, you know. The difference was the profit. You know, pretty impressive. And he was a kid also. He used to like greet the usher, we'll call it, the hockey games at the Chicago Stadium, back when, not United Center, the Chicago Stadium, when the Blackhawks played in the old days. So again, these were very, very humble beginnings, but look, it was how the majority of our people, I mean the American people, as well as the Jewish people, lived in that time. And I'm dwelling on that only for a very simple reason. We should really be grateful for what we have. And it was a mission of Jerry and his generation to make sure that next generations of our families have better shot at life than they did when they were kids, and had a better childhood than they did when they were kids. Well, again, mission accomplished. Mission accomplished. When Jerry graduated from the high school, he joined the military. So that's another aspect of his life. He was a great patriot of our country. So he served in the Army Air Force. Gene was historically correct, because Air Force became the separate branch only in 1947. Jerry got in shortly before that, right after the war, shortly before that. But when they branched out Air Force, you know, my son is in the Army, so he always complains that Air Force always get nicer things than the Army. You know, the accommodations are better, everything's better in the Air Force. But anyway, so Jerry was in the Air Force back when it was part of the Army. He was stationed in Tokyo as part of the occupation force. And, well, he enjoyed it a lot because that opened his eyes to the world. You know, because we live in the nation. Americans don't like to travel abroad that much, really, not very much. It's just part of the culture. We have a big country, right? When Jerry got to see Japan, there's a whole world out there. He was fascinated, and which made him later on, when Gene and Jerry created family, they were great world travelers. And he was a student of history, not just American history, but history in general, student of languages, student of cultures. And that experience triggered that very important aspect of Jerry's life and his interests. He was, as I said, a very gifted young man. He went to University of Illinois, where he accomplished not only bachelor's, but also his master's degree. They didn't have the MBA back then, so it was just kind of master's in business, finance, and marketing. So he was a controller for a number of years for different companies, and then when he was 51, he decided to go on his own and become an entrepreneur. Well, again, this is the American story, right? You're a patriot, you're a hard worker, you have your entrepreneurial spirit, American entrepreneurial spirit, and exhibit it. And he started his own company, which essentially supplied labor for various other companies, mostly truck drivers, steel companies. Coca-Cola had an account, incidentally, so, and on and on. We don't have to go into detail. I think you all know that his business career was quite illustrious. And after 13 years in business, he successfully retired. Gene and Jerry then moved to Northbrook, then into the city. 6 years ago, they went to California because Chicago winters are unbearable. Well, we have the worst climate. What can I tell you here in Chicago? Was it?
Could be Minnesota.
No, Minnesota's, no, you know what, it's not as humid. It's a little bit drier. It's snow or it's colder, but it's drier than Chicago, and not as windy. So, I mean, I know that. It's Toronto, yes. Toronto, Buffalo, those, yeah, that's the same thing. Detroit, oh yeah, those are bad. Great Lakes, big cities, bad stuff. Bad one. Bad stuff. You don't want it. But for the last 40 years, they wintered in, those snowbirds, right, wintered in California, spent winters there. So it was a great time. Now, Jerry and I'm going to quote Eugene. It was a brilliant statement. When Jerry was a student in the high school, like in schools, they often vote, right? The best student, right? The most artistically gifted, all kinds of this. The most this, the most that. Jerry was voted to be the most original. This was a brilliant line. Right? I mean, that just says it all. That says it all. So, because you see, Jerry was he was a very intelligent man. His views and opinions were characterized by lack of ambiguity. That was a nice way of putting it. You too, Keith? Yeah, right. That was a nice way of putting it. I was, yes, I was, right, I was. So in other words, you didn't have to guess exactly what Jerry thinks. It wasn't necessary. Be very clear. Give him a topic, he'll give you the opinion. But at the same time, I met many men like that too. Well, many ladies too, by the way, but many people like that. But you know what? For some, when they are like this, their opinions, the difference between them and Jerry, what made Jerry stood out, is that, well, his opinions were still enlightened. He knew what he was talking about, much of the time anyway, right? Most of the time he did, right? Again, because he was a student. He was a student. For him, this thirst for knowledge, this passion for learning about the world, that's what moved him. That's what made him tick. And again, he was a student of history, and again, he studied not just Louisiana Purchase was one of the latest things they studied at this continuing education class that they took, Gin and Jerry. World War I, World War II, all those worldly topics. Now, when they traveled, they didn't just buy a ticket, fly to Paris, and take a selfie against the background of the Eiffel Tower. That's what most tourists do, Americans and otherwise. That's not traveling, that's taking selfie. A very expensive one for that matter, because it also, you pay for the ticket and the hotel. No, that's not traveling. The traveling is when you study before you go. By the way, that's how I travel too, Gene. Before I go, I want to read about the place. They would buy books. They would study the history of the place. They would study landmarks. They would study cultural sites, and that only then they would go. And that's how they would also design the routing. So this was the man of enlightenment, the man of knowledge, and he remained like that throughout his life until the very, very end. So a very brilliant, very, very sharp mind. He enjoyed arts as well. Music, jazz, symphony, theater, pretty much, everything. And he was also well, kind of athletic when he was younger. Of course, I mean, when you're 98, it's hard to run marathons. But he was a good handball player in his time. Handball is not a very common game in the United States. It's much more popular in Europe. In Europe, it's big, actually, pretty big, almost as big as basketball, But he was a good handball player, and he was a weightlifter even when he was younger. In fact, what was impressive, and that's anyone who ever lifted, he could lift more than his own weight. That's what separates a casual lift weighter from the serious guy. So that was it was just really a wonderful, wonderful life. Now, and he was also, someone who would not refrain from just having an adventure. And I will share just a couple of stories Jen shared with me, and I'm very grateful. Their honeymoon was in Puerto Vallarta, but it's not like Puerto Vallarta now. It's Puerto Vallarta back then. It was a wild, wild place. They flew to Mexico City, then on to Puerto Vallarta. It was a puddle jumper. On the way back, they ended up flying in the cockpit on the return flight. But when they got to Puerto Vallarta, they needed to go. There was a river they had to cross. There was no bridge. They just went just across the river, across the water, and kept going. That's how it was. So this was quite adventurous. One time they flew to Buenos Aires, which is literally across the world, from north to south. They only had the ticket. They didn't have the hotel. Because they said, okay, we're going to get there and we'll figure out what to do. And then they just went to one hotel, was no good, next hotel, okay. They took it, and then in the hotel they figured out the route and the program and all that stuff. So again, adventure, improvisation is also, an important part of life. And when it came to traveling, as I say, you name the place where they haven't been. I don't know if they went to Antarctica, probably not, but everything else, Asia, Europe, Israel, of course, that goes without saying. South America, I already mentioned, pretty much everywhere they went. Again, seeing the world is very important. It's part of being the man of the world, which Jerry certainly was. Which does not contradict him being the American patriot. Those two things are not incompatible at all. So, he was a very good, very, very kind man, and those people that worked with him always held him in great regard. He loved, but first and foremost, of course, he loved his family. Family was all that really mattered to him. All his hard work had only one purpose: make sure that the family is doing well. Again, he went through the humble beginnings, and by the way, also throughout his life, he was very economical. He would not economical, yes, economical. Just like his views lacked ambiguity. Right. So he was economical. Yeah. Well, look, all those who went through that experience, they were like that. They were like that because.
He taught all of that.
Yeah, you know what? It's a good lesson. It's a good lesson, because next generation of Americans, unfortunately, have inclination to be wasteful with their financial resources. So Jerry, it's a very important chapter in Jerry's book of life, right? So, the family. First, I would like to highlight his sister Marilyn, who untimely passed away in 1996. May memory be a blessing. And of course, Gene and Jerry. I talked about Jerry, and I kept on mentioning Gene because it was very difficult to separate the two. I mean, imagine this: 67 years together, 67 years of marriage. Just to give you a perspective, some people don't live that long. I mean, my grandma lived to be 65 and passed away back in the 70s. 67 years together. And I'm not saying that this was a smooth ride. It's like, long haul flight across the ocean. There will be turbulence along the way somewhere, but, but you're going to make it. And for 67 years, they shared joys and faced challenges together in this world. He was a very loving husband of Jean. He was blessed with two wonderful children, Stacy and Keith, and as the father, he was very proud of them. And, the mission of the parent is to make sure your kids grow up to be good people. Because, when our children grow up, they have a good career, and you guys, I'm sure you did great. And he was proud of you, rightfully so. But really, the primary source of pride is when the moment comes, I say to myself, my son, my daughter grew up to be a good human being. That's when I'm done. That's when the mission is accomplished. And he has accomplished his mission here as well. Stacy is married to Ben, who's also very dear to Jerry's heart, and he was blessed with wonderful grandchildren, Josh and Charlotte. And he was blessed with a great grandson, the one who got tired of listening to the rabbi, DJ. DJ is very smart, but he got tired listening to the rabbi. Yes. So, because rabbi, see, I told you about 5 minutes. Yeah, here we go. Well, next after me will be an attorney. So, behold, lo and behold. So, which brings me to my next point.
Be careful what you say. Right?
Be careful what you, well, it's too late. Stacy will now share her thoughts about Jerry. Stacy.
Oh, an open microphone for a trial lawyer. Everybody sit down. This is going to take a while. Just kidding. All right, I have a couple of notes. Dun, 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 dun. Okay, did any of you ever hear my dad have opinions? Anybody? He had opinions about everything, right? And he was never hesitated to share them, right? Okay. So I'm just going to tell you one story about that. I was asking my cousin Tammy some details because I forgot this. We were in San Diego one holiday time, which is when we'd go and these guys would come. And it was a year that my mom's middle sister, Rita, and her husband, Seymour, were with us. And one night, it was a couple that Rita and Seymour knew. What was the name again? Jean and Milt. And they had come over for dinner. And Milt is an expert in his field, let's just say, okay? And they get into a conversation, and my dad starts contradicting him. Correcting him, thank you, correcting him. And it was, I could see my husband was just like, okay, is it dessert time? Because it was just like, and he had very strong opinions, and he'd argue with people who knew way more than he did. But that was okay, it was good. He was also very particular in what he liked. So, I don't know, a couple of years ago, everybody was in Portland, and Ben and I were like, oh, we're gonna go to Mexican food. My dad's like, no, I wanna go for Italian food. Okay. So we picked a restaurant not too far from us, and we sit down, we look at the menu, and the waiter goes around and asks everybody what they want, and gets to my dad. He orders a chopped apple salad. A chopped apple salad, and I'm thinking, what was that? I won't tell you the rest of the story, but the apples weren't chopped correctly. There weren't enough of them. Anyways. And later I said, so why did you want to go to why did you want to go to an Italian? I wanted minestrone soup. Okay, so next time just tell me you want minestrone soup, and we'll go somewhere. So he was very particular in what he liked, but he was also very adventurous, as the rabbi was talking about. So this is a story, I don't even think you know this story. One year, you were at a conference in Connecticut, and it was somewhere. Anyways, and so my dad and Keith and I, we flew up to Calgary, and we rented a trailer. We rented, one of those truck trailers, like over the, and we drove, up through Lake Louise and Banff and da-da-da-da-da-da. And we were camping in this trailer. How many days did it take us to figure out that the refrigerator, to make the refrigerator work, it had to be level. So they had this little level in the refrigerator. So my dad would be trying to get the camper. He would be in the camper going, okay, it's level, no good. And I'm in the back trying to tell my dad where to go. Oh my God, it was hysterical. But the best part of that trip, we went to the Athabasca Glacier. And we're climbing up, and my dad gets stuck halfway up. He couldn't go up, he couldn't go down. And he's now, in his he was probably in his 50s at that point. So he gets stuck hiking up this glacier, and it was pretty steep. Fortunately, some guy comes by and takes his hand and pulls him the rest of the way up. But he didn't hesitate to do that kind of stuff. So lots of adventures like that. Very, very adventurous. As DJ even had adventures. There you go.
Just having one right now.
That's right. He was a lifelong learner, always reading, always studying things, always figuring things out. He didn't want to miss anything. So I remember we went one year to the expo up in Montreal. And if you remember, it was the World's Fair. And if you remember, there was things that were like really crowded. And so we get to the gate, and they would open the gate, and he would run. And then the three of us would come, and he'd be standing in line. Didn't want to miss a thing. Ben was reminding me, we'd go to a museum together, and we'd have to set a time to be done, because 5 of us would all be done, or 7 of us, how many, and he's still in the first room reading every single thing, so he never lost that. In fact, I think that was one of the most difficult parts of the last little bit of his life. He couldn't really read again anymore. He had a reader for him, but it wasn't the same. But he was always, always learning, always learning. I know he was very proud of his grandchildren. He might not have said that as much as you wanted him to, but he was very proud. And he's so thrilled to get to see DJ start his journey, so that was really good. And who saw the play the other night when the Bears beat the Packers? Woo-hoo! My dad and I would have talked about that for 45 minutes, for sure. And Ernie, sorry about this. When the Bears win the Super Bowl this year, next year, sorry, Ernie, sorry. Yeah, sorry, Ernie. He's a Pittsburgh fan, so. But when the Bears win, think of my dad. Thank you all for coming.
Well, he lived long enough to see the Cubs win, first time in 108 years, 2016, yeah. So, I mean, maybe the Bears will do it, I don't know. Probably not, but, you know. But let's pray. Jerry will petition God on the Bears behalf. Well, Keith will now share his sentiment and thoughts about his beloved dad. Yes.
Hi, I didn't have as much specifically planned about exactly what I was going to say, but interesting you brought up the Expo 67, because that was my earliest childhood memory that I actually remember, because I was only 4 years old at the time. And I remember, and my memory was walking up to the giant geodesic dome at the fair, and that was crystal clear in my mind that I'm a very mathematical, like engineering, kind of like your father, actually, my mother's father, like that type of a brain. So I sense how much I'm rooted in both my mother and my father. I'm also very direct with people about how I, when I talk. Sometimes I try to be more diplomatic when depends on the context, but it all depends on context. But the main thing I would have to say about growing up in my family with my mother and father is how lack of any sort of, like how stable it was, and how there was certainly drama, but there was no trauma. I didn't have any sort of childhood trauma driven into me from anything in my family. And I realized, how many people do have trauma in their lives, and they grew up, difficulties. Sorry. And so here I am now. I'm retired as a software engineer. I was a software engineer. That's why I ended up moving out to Silicon Valley from out of college. I went to Oberlin College and then to Palo Alto, Mountain View area. I was living there working for various companies. And then, I was, now I'm actually doing filmmaking. I'm actually writing a feature film, but I'm not naturally like a writer. I'm not the person who says, I need to write, and I realize I come from it more of a, engineering mindset. I have a story to tell. And I realized, the problem is, this is my biggest criticism of my father, is that because there was no trauma in my family, here I am trying to write stories. I don't have any basis for doing these dramatic stories. Like, how do I have to make shit up, as they say, right? I mean, so, that's my biggest criticism of my father, is that, that's so sorry about that. I know. Yeah, I mean, that's it's the it's funny. I wanted to tell that story that way, because he raised us the right way, and he didn't have anything growing up, and you could tell that by the way he lived very frugally, and he instilled in me I'm not really tied to stuff. I don't buy a lot of stuff so much. Don't buy a lot of huge impulsive buying, and what was the other thing I was going to talk about that is that, just rooted in like how I live my life, and that I have this stable life, and I was able to focus on everything in my life, and they gave me opportunities. I remember you giving me like I learned, I wanted to go ice skating, so you taught me how to ice skating, or to learn how to play instruments. I still have my original recorder that I played with my music book in kindergarten, and then my trumpet, and And I have all this stuff that, you know, he wasn't able to do as a kid. He didn't have the means to be able to do a lot of those things. And they provided me in the environment, you know, living where I did and having the school system that I had. It was just, you know, I'm very grateful what I've been given from my father, and I realize how much he's given to me. Thanks.
Friends, so we have reflected on Jerry's book of life. And this is a complete reflection. There's so many more stories to tell, so many memories to share, and I'm sure you'll continue to share them throughout the day today and in the days and, you know, weeks and years to come. But all in all, when all's said and done, if we get to live the way Jerry did, there's nothing to regret. Life is as good as it gets when it comes to the way Jerry walked his path. So today, by partnering with Jerry, we also say that he will remain an inspiring spiritual presence in our life. He will continue to live not only in our hearts, our minds, but most importantly, our good deeds, deeds of love and kindness one another. So may Jerry's memory be a blessing upon all of us. Please rise for the moment of silence, and the memorial prayers will follow. אל מלא רחמים שוכם במרומים, אמצע מנוחה נכונה על כנפי השכינה, במעלות קדושים וטהורים כזער הרקיעים מזכירים, את נשמת יוסל טובי בן שמואל שהלך לעולמו, בעל רחמים יסתרגו בסתר כנפיו לעולמים, וזו בצורחה ימת נשמתו, אדוני הוא נחלתו, וינוח בשלום על משכבו, ונאמר אמן. God, full of mercy, who dwells in the heights, provide a sure rest upon the divine presence's wings, within the range of the holy, pure, and glorious, who shine and resemble the skies, to the soul of Yosel Tovia ben Shmuel, who has entered eternity. The Master of mercy will protect him forever and will bind his soul in the bond of everlasting life. God is his inheritance. May you rest in peace. Let us all say Amen. Amen. You may be seated, my friends. We shall continue at the graveside. And Ari will now make all the appropriate announcements concerning the way we will proceed to the burial place and how we're going to do that.
Thank you, Rabbi. Ladies and gentlemen, this does conclude the portion of our services here in the chapel. I want to let everyone know that upon conclusion of services at the cemetery, there will be a Shiva located at 1750 East Summit Court in Deerfield. This address is in your service folders. I am going to now ask the following to please come forward to act as pallbearers: Joshua, Ben, Keith, Chuck, Ernest, and Michael. If I could ask the pallbearers to come forward and everyone else to rise as we escort Jerome from the chapel. Thank you. All right, if I could have three gentlemen on each side, please. We're not going to lift. Are you a pallbearer, sir?